The screaming stopped around midnight. Danny pressed his ear against the cold stone wall of the servant quarters and listened to the silence that followed. Someone had angered King Razeth again. Someone always did. By morning, the body would be gone, and everyone would pretend nothing had happened. That was life in the obsidian fortress. Danny rolled onto his back and stared at the ceiling. Sleep never came easy here. The air always smelled like sulfur and burnt metal. The walls hummed with the energy shields that kept the fortress stable in orbit. Somewhere far above, the Dragon King slept in his throne room, curled around a pile of treasures stolen from 1,000 conquered worlds, 19 years old, and Danny had never known anything else. His parents died when Earth fell to the Draconeer invasion. He was just a baby then, raised in the servant halls by whoever had time to spare. The older humans taught him to keep his head down, do his work, and never look the dragon warriors in the eye. Good advice for staying alive. Danny worked in the beast stables 3 levels below the main fortress. Most humans got assigned to cleaning or cooking or repairing machines. Danny got the animals because nobody else wanted them. The creatures King Razeth collected were dangerous, violent things pulled from the worst planets in the galaxy. They killed handlers regularly. But Danny had a gift. He could calm them when others could not. The morning bells rang at 6. Danny pulled on his work clothes and headed down the narrow corridors toward the stables. Other servants passed him without speaking. Everyone was careful with their words here. The fortress had listening devices everywhere. Say the wrong thing and you vanished. The stable entrance was a massive metal door covered in claw marks. Danny pressed his hand against the scanner and waited. The door groaned open, revealing rows of reinforced cages stretching into the darkness. Growls and hisses echoed from the shadows. The smell hit him like a wall. Animal waste, old blood, and fear. "You are late," said Grath, the stable master. He was Draconeer, but smaller than most, barely 12 feet tall. His scales were dull brown instead of the usual black or red. The Ravager in Pen 7 has not eaten for 3 days. It killed another handler yesterday. Danny grabbed a feeding cart and pushed it toward Pen 7. The other workers gave him looks that said they thought he was walking to his death. Maybe they were right. The Ravager was a 6-legged predator from a death world on the Outer Rim. It had teeth like swords and could move faster than anything its size should. 2 Draconeer warriors had tried to train it last week. Both ended up in the medical wing. He stopped in front of the pen and looked through the energy barrier. The Ravager sat in the far corner, its multiple eyes fixed on him. Blood stained its jaws from yesterday's kill. The creature was beautiful in a terrible way, all muscle and rage and perfect hunting instinct. "Hey there," Danny said quietly. He did not shout or make sudden moves. "I know you were scared. This place is wrong for you. Too small, too loud, nothing like home." The Ravager's ears twitched. It watched him but did not charge. Danny grabbed a chunk of raw meat from the cart and tossed it through a feeding slot. The meat landed near the creature. The Ravager sniffed it but did not eat. "Trust took time. I will come back later," Danny told it. "You eat when you are ready." He moved on to the next pen and the next, feeding and cleaning and talking to creatures that should have torn him apart. By noon, he was covered in dirt and sweat. By evening, his arms ached from hauling water and scrubbing floors. But the animals were calmer. Even the ones that hated everyone else tolerated Danny. He returned to Pen 7 before leaving. The meat was gone. The Ravager stood closer to the barrier, watching him with something that might have been curiosity. "Good," Danny said. "Tomorrow we try again." That night, alarms woke the entire fortress. Danny jumped from his bed and ran to the window. Ships surrounded the obsidian fortress, their weapons powered but not firing. Something big was happening. The intercom crackled to life. "All servants report to the main hall immediately." Danny joined the flood of humans and other species rushing through the corridors. Fear was thick in the air. Random summons usually meant punishment. Someone had failed at something, and now everyone would pay. The main hall was enormous, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow. King Razeth sat on his throne at the far end. He was massive, over 30 feet of gleaming black scales and razor-sharp claws. His eyes glowed like burning coals. When he breathed, smoke curled from his nostrils. Yesterday, my finest war beast killed 2 of my warriors. Razeth's voice boomed across the hall. Today, I am told a human calmed it with words. I want to see this human. Danny's blood turned to ice. Grath must have reported what happened. The stable master stood near the throne, carefully avoiding eye contact with anyone. Step forward. Razeth commanded. Danny's legs moved on their own. He walked through the crowd of servants until he stood alone in the open space before the throne. Up close, the Dragon King was even more terrifying. His claws could slice through steel. His teeth could crush bone. One breath of fire, and Danny would be ash. Look at me, human. Danny raised his eyes. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. You tamed my Ravager. I did not tame it, Your Majesty, Danny said. His voice shook, but he kept talking. I just treated it with kindness. It was scared and angry. I gave it space and food and spoke calmly. That is all. Razeth leaned forward. His breath was hot enough to make Danny's skin prickle. My warriors used force and discipline. They are dead. You used kindness and soft words. The beast eats. Explain this. Force makes animals more afraid, Danny said. When they are afraid, they fight harder. Kindness shows them they're safe. Safe animals do not need to fight. The Dragon King stared at him for a long moment. Danny was certain he was about to die. Then Razeth sat back on his throne. You will become my personal stable keeper, Razeth declared. You will care for all my war beasts. If you succeed, you live. If you fail, you burn. Do you understand? Yes, Your Majesty. Good. Take him to the royal stables. Guards grabbed Danny's arms and pulled him away. The last thing he saw before leaving the hall was King Razeth watching him with an expression Danny could not read. It might have been curiosity. It might have been hunger. Either way, Danny's life had just changed forever. The royal stables were nothing like the lower pens. Danny stood at the entrance and felt his stomach drop. The cages here were twice as large and filled with creatures he had only heard about in whispered warnings. A void stalker paced in the first pen, its black fur absorbing all light. In the second cage, something with too many heads hissed at him. Further down, he saw claws, fangs, and eyes that tracked his every movement. This was your home for 3 days, said the guard who had escorted him. He was Draconeer, young and clearly unhappy about babysitting a human. Master Vrag will explain your duties. Do not disappoint the king. The guard left before Danny could ask questions. He walked deeper into the stables, his footsteps echoing on the metal floor. Every cage he passed contained something that could kill him in seconds. The air stank of old blood and aggression. These animals were kept in a constant state of rage. You must be the human. The voice came from above. Danny looked up and saw a massive alien hanging from the ceiling by 4 arms. Master Vrag was not Draconeer. He was Krellian, a species known for their climbing ability and bad tempers. I give you 2 weeks before something eats you. The last keeper lasted 3. What happened to him? Danny asked. The Void Stalker got hungry. Vrag dropped to the floor with a heavy thud. He was shorter than Danny, but 3 times as wide, all muscle and chitinous armor. Your duties are simple. Feed them. Clean their cages. Keep them aggressive and ready for war. His Majesty uses these beasts in the arena and on the battlefield. They must be killers. Danny looked at the nearest cage. Inside, a reptilian creature slammed its head against the bars over and over. Blood ran down its skull, but it did not stop. They are hurting themselves. They are warriors, Vrag snapped. Pain makes them strong. Pain makes them desperate. Danny said quietly to Vrag's 4 eyes narrowed. You will follow my instructions, or you will be fed to them. Understood. Yes, Master Vrag. The Krellian showed him where the food was stored, how to operate the cleaning systems, and which cages absolutely could not be opened under any circumstances. Then he left Danny alone with 20 of the deadliest creatures in the galaxy. Danny started with the basics. He fed each animal, though most ignored the food. They were too stressed to eat properly. He cleaned what he could without entering the cages. And he talked. He talked to every single creature, introducing himself and explaining that he meant no harm. The Void Stalker watched him with eyes like mirrors. I know you killed someone, Danny told it, but I bet they hurt you first. I will not hurt you. I promise. Days blurred together. Wake up. Feed the beasts. Clean. Talk. Sleep. Repeat. Master Vrag checked on him twice a day, always looking disappointed that Danny was still alive. The other servants avoided him. Working the royal stables was considered a death sentence, but slowly, things changed. Danny started sneaking extra food to the animals. Not much, just enough to ease their constant hunger. He discovered that the cleaning systems could be adjusted to be quieter, less startling. He learned which creatures preferred darkness and which needed light. He paid attention to what no one else had bothered to notice. The head-slamming reptile stopped hurting itself after Danny placed soft padding in its cage. The multi-headed creature calmed down when he hummed old Earth songs while cleaning. Even the Void Stalker began sitting near the front of its cage when Danny was around. On the 8th day, King Razeth visited the stables. Danny was feeding a creature called a spine devil when he heard the heavy footsteps behind him. He turned and dropped to one knee, as all servants were required to do in the king's presence. Stand, Razeth commanded. Let me see your work. Danny stood and stepped aside. The Dragon King walked slowly past each cage, his massive form making the corridor feel small. He stopped at the Void Stalker's pen. The creature sat calmly, watching but not attacking. This beast killed a Draconeer warrior with its bare claws, Razeth said. It was the most violent animal in my collection. Now it sits like a pet. It was violent because it was treated violently, Your Majesty, Danny said carefully. I have given it food and space and quiet. Violence was its only language before. Now it is learning a different one. Razeth turned those burning eyes on Danny. You sound like you pity them. I do, Your Majesty. They were taken from their homes and put in cages. They fight because they see no other choice. But fighting is not their nature. Survival is. The Dragon King was silent for a long moment. Then he moved to another cage, one Danny had not been able to approach safely yet. Inside was a Titan Wyrm, a creature nearly as large as a Draconeer. It had been captured 2 weeks ago and had killed 4 handlers already. This one arrives from a death world at the edge of my empire, Razeth said. It is meant to be my new mount. No one has been able to get close to it. Danny approached the cage carefully. The Titan Wyrm was beautiful, covered in scales that shifted from blue to purple. But its eyes were wild with fear and rage. It slammed against the bars when Danny got near. I need 7 days, Danny said. Razeth's head swiveled toward him. What? Give me 7 days with the Wyrm. If I cannot calm it by then, you can do whatever you wish with both of us. You would risk your life for an animal. I would risk my life trying to help it, Your Majesty. That is different. Something flickered in Razeth's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. Very well. 7 days. The entire court will gather to watch your attempt. Succeed, and you will have proven your methods. Fail, and you will die in front of everyone. Do you accept these terms? Danny's mouth was dry, but he nodded. I accept. After the king left, Danny stood in front of the Wyrm's cage for a long time. The creature paced back and forth, its claws scraping against the metal floor. It was terrified. Everything about its body language screamed fear. I'm going to help you, Danny whispered. I know you do not believe me yet, but I will. For 3 days, Danny did nothing but sit outside the cage. He brought his meals there, ate slowly, and talked about Earth. He told the Wyrm about oceans and forests and things he barely remembered from old stories. The creature ignored him at first, but gradually it began to pace less. By the 4th day, it would sit and listen while he spoke. On the 5th day, Danny noticed the Wyrm favoring its right side. He looked closer and saw an infected wound, probably from the capture. The creature was in pain, and no one had bothered to treat it. I see it, Danny said softly. That must hurt terribly. If you let me, I can help. He spent hours convincing Master Vrag to give him medical supplies. The Krellian thought he was insane, but eventually handed over antiseptic and bandages. Danny prepared everything carefully, then opened the cage door. Every servant who happened to be nearby stopped working to watch. This was it. The moment the human died, Danny stepped inside. The Titan Wyrm raised its head and growled, a sound that vibrated through the floor. Danny held up his empty hands. "Just me," he said quietly. "Just trying to help." He moved slowly, carefully, talking the entire time. The Wyrm tensed, but did not attack. Danny knelt beside its injured side and began cleaning the wound. The creature shuddered, but held still. Up close, Danny could feel its rapid heartbeat, could see the pain in its eyes. "There," he said after several minutes. "All done. It will heal now." The Wyrm turned its massive head and looked at him, really looked at him. Then it did something no one expected. It lowered its head and rested it gently against Danny's chest. That Danny's eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. He placed one hand on the Wyrm's snout. "You are safe now," he whispered. "I promise." On the seventh day, when King Razeth and his entire court gathered to watch, Danny walked into the Wyrm's cage unarmed. The creature came to him immediately, lowering its body so he could climb onto its back. Danny rode it around the cage while hundreds of beings watched in absolute silence. Razeth stood from his throne. "How did you do this? My finest warriors could not break this beast in months." Danny slid off the Wyrm's back and faced the king. "I did not break it, your majesty. I healed it. There's a difference." The Dragon King stared at him for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. "Teach me this difference." King Razeth started visiting the stables every day. At first, he claimed he was checking on his war beasts. But Danny noticed the king spent more time asking questions than inspecting animals. They would stand outside the Titan Wyrm's cage and talk for hours while the creature slept peacefully nearby. "Why do you think fear is a useful tool, your majesty?" Danny asked one evening. He was cleaning equipment while Razeth watched from the corridor. The question was bold, maybe too bold, but the king seemed to tolerate his honesty. "Fear prevents rebellion," Razeth answered. His tail swished slowly behind him, a sign Danny had learned meant the king was thinking. "When my subjects fear me, they obey. Obedience brings order. Order brings peace. Does it bring peace? Or does it just bring quiet?" Razeth's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Danny set down the brush he was holding. "The beasts in these cages were quiet when I arrived. They barely moved, but they were not at peace. They were terrified and breaking inside. The moment they saw a chance, they attacked. Fear does not stop violence. It just delays it. And what do you suggest instead, human?" "Love." The word came out like a mockery. "Respect," Danny said simply. "When the Titan Wyrm respects me, it chooses to follow. When it feared me, it would have killed me the first chance it got. Choice is stronger than force." The Dragon King was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "My advisors would call you a fool. Maybe I am, your majesty. But the Wyrm still lets me ride it." Word of these conversations spread through the obsidian fortress. The servants whispered about the human who spoke freely with the Dragon King. The Draconeer court muttered about their ruler wasting time on stable philosophy. General Kryn, Razeth's chief military commander, made his displeasure known at every opportunity. "Your Majesty spends his days with animals and a pet human," Kryn said during a council meeting. Danny was not present, but heard about it later from other servants. "The Empire needs strength, not softness. Our enemies will see this as weakness." Razeth apparently said nothing in response. But that night, he came to the stables angry. Smoke curled from his nostrils, and his claws scraped against the metal floor. The animals sensed his mood and grew restless. "Do you know what they call you in the court?" Razeth growled at Danny. "My pet, my toy. They say you have made me soft." Danny continued measuring food portions, keeping his movements calm despite his racing heart. "Have I, your majesty? Have you what? Made you soft?" Razeth's roar shook the entire stable. The caged creatures scattered to the far corners of their pens. But Danny did not flinch. He had learned that the king's anger was often covering something else. "I have ruled this empire for 200 years, Razeth snarled. "I burned entire worlds. I crushed armies. I made the galaxy kneel. And now my own generals question me because I listened to a human who talks to animals. Then stop listening to me, Danny said quietly. You are the king. You can do whatever you want. That is not the point. Then what is the point, Your Majesty? Razeth went very still. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Uncertain. I do not know anymore. Danny walked over to the Titan Wyrm's cage. The creature came to the bars, sensing his presence. He reached through and stroked its scaled snout. When I first came here, this Wyrm wanted to kill anything that moved. Now it is the calmest animal in the stables. Did that happen because I made it soft, or because I showed it another way to be strong? The Dragon King watched him with those burning eyes. You think I am like your animals, scared and lashing out. I think you're a person who learned that violence keeps you safe, Danny said carefully. And maybe it did for a long time. But safe and happy are not the same thing. Razeth left without another word. Danny did not see him for 3 days. On the 4th day, a farming colony called Verdant failed to meet its tribute quota. Standard punishment for this was orbital bombardment. Razeth gathered his fleet and prepared to make an example of them. The entire court assembled to watch the execution order. Danny heard about it from Master Vrag. The Krellian seemed almost sympathetic when he delivered the news. The king will destroy that world tonight. Millions will die. This is what happens when colonies fail their obligations. Danny's hands shook as he fed the animals that evening. Millions of people, families, children, all dead because of mispayment. He thought about his own parents, killed when Earth resisted the Draconeer invasion. The cycle just repeated forever. He was not supposed to enter the throne room without permission. Servants did not interrupt council meetings. But Danny walked past the guards anyway, too angry and desperate to care about protocol. The guards were so surprised they forgot to stop him. Razeth sat on his throne, surrounded by advisors. General Kryn stood at his right hand, pointing to a holographic display of Verdant. The planet looked green and peaceful from space. In a few hours, it would be ash. Your Majesty, Danny called out. His voice echoed in the massive chamber. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to him. Razeth's expression was unreadable. What is the meaning of this? General Kryn demanded. Guards, remove this human immediately. Wait, Razeth said. He leaned forward on his throne. Speak, Danny. You have interrupted my counsel. You must have something important to say. Danny's legs felt weak, but he forced himself to walk closer. Do not destroy Verdant. Please, give me 30 days. Let me go there and find out why they failed. If it is rebellion, punish them. But if it is something else, let me help fix it. Absurd, Kryn spat. This is exactly what I warned about, Your Majesty. A human makes you weak. Colonies must learn that failure has consequences. They will learn nothing if they are dead. Danny shot back. He looked at Razeth, pleading. You asked me to teach you the difference between breaking and healing. Let me show you. 1 month. That is all I ask. Razeth was silent for a long moment. His advisors whispered among themselves, some angry, some confused. Finally, the Dragon King spoke. You have 30 days. But if you fail, both you and Verdant burn. Do you accept those terms? I do, Your Majesty. Then go. Prove your methods work on more than just animals. Danny traveled to Verdant on a small diplomatic ship. He brought 2 human scientists from Earth and a translator. The planet was beautiful, covered in farmland and small settlements. The people were Kelthans, a peaceful species known for their agricultural skills. The colony leaders met him with suspicion. They had expected warships and fire, not a human teenager asking questions. We did not rebel, the chief administrator told Danny. Her name was Sela, and she looked exhausted. A blight destroyed half our crops. We tried everything, but could not stop it. We sent reports, but received no response. We knew punishment was coming. Danny spent 2 weeks working with the scientists to identify the blight. It was a fungal infection from a neighboring system, spread by cargo ships. Once they understood the cause, the solution was relatively simple. New crop strains, better quarantine procedures. Equipment Earth had developed for similar problems that by week 3, the farms were recovering. By week 4, Verdant was producing again. Danny helped them negotiate a payment plan for the missed tribute and set up direct communication with the fortress to prevent future misunderstandings. Before he left, Administrator Sela gave him a message to take back to King Razeth. Tell your king that we are grateful. No one expected mercy. We will remember this kindness. Danny returned to the Obsidian Fortress and delivered his report to the council. General Kryn looked furious. The other advisors seemed unsure how to react. This had never happened before. Razeth read the reports in silence. Then he looked at Danny. They sent a message of thanks. In 200 years of rule, no colony has ever thanked me for anything. Because you never gave them reason to, Your Majesty, Danny said. That night, someone tried to kill him. Danny woke to find 3 assassins in his quarters. They wore no identifying marks, but moved like trained Draconeer warriors. He would have died if the Titan Wyrm had not broken free from its stable. The creature burst through 2 walls to reach him, moving with terrifying speed. It killed all 3 assassins before Danny could even process what was happening. Then it stood over him, protective and trembling with adrenaline. Razeth arrived minutes later, followed by guards. He looked at the dead assassins, then at Danny, then at the Wyrm standing guard. Someone in my court wants you dead, the king said quietly. They see what you are doing as a threat. What am I doing, Your Majesty? Changing things. Razeth's voice was heavy, and change is always dangerous. Razeth dragged the bodies of the assassins to the throne room himself. Blood streaked across the polished floor as he dumped them at the feet of his assembled court. Danny stood beside the throne, still shaking from the attack. The Titan Wyrm waited outside, too large to fit through the doors. Someone hired these killers. Razeth's voice was cold and sharp as broken glass. Someone in this room decided my stable keeper needed to die. Step forward now, and your death will be quick. Silence. The advisors and generals looked at each other, but no one moved. General Kryn stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. No one. Razeth circled the room slowly. Then I will find you myself. And when I do, I will make your death last for days. Your Majesty, Danny spoke up, his voice still unsteady. Maybe there's another way. Another way? Razeth turned to him. They tried to murder you. I know, and I am angry too. But killing them will not fix what is broken here. Danny took a breath, trying to steady himself. Your court is divided. Some want the old ways. Some are curious about change. Violence will only make the division worse. General Kryn laughed, a harsh sound. The human speaks of division while he divides us. This is precisely why he must be removed. He corrupts you, Your Majesty. He makes you question strength. He makes me question whether strength and cruelty are the same thing, Razeth countered. They are not. Then prove it, Kryn challenged. Show us you're still the Dragon King we followed into conquest. Make a decision based on power, not sentiment. Razeth looked at Danny, then at his court, then back at the bodies on the floor. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire chamber. I sentence the conspirators, when found, to labor. They will go to Verdant and help rebuild what they sought to destroy. They will learn that mercy is not weakness. It is choice. Kryn's face twisted with rage. You have gone soft. The Dragon King I knew would have burned this entire court to find the guilty. Now you send them to farm. The Dragon King you knew ruled through fear alone, Razeth said quietly. I am learning there are other ways to rule. Better ways. If you cannot accept that, General, then perhaps you are in the wrong court. The confrontation ended there, but the damage was done. Word spread through the empire within hours. King Razeth had chosen mercy over vengeance. He had let conspirators live. He had listened to a human instead of his general's point. 3 days later, a coalition of 12 colony worlds declared independence. They were led by the Kelhari, a warrior species almost as fierce as the Draconeer. Their message was broadcast across all channels. The Dragon King has grown weak. We no longer recognize his authority. We claim our freedom. The council meeting that followed was chaos. Every advisor shouted over each other, demanding immediate military response. General Kryn slammed his fist on the table hard enough to crack it. This is what mercy brings, he roared. Rebellion. They see kindness as weakness. We must crush them immediately, burn their worlds, make them remember why they fear us. Other voices joined his. Deploy the fleet. Show no mercy. Remind them of our power. Razeth sat on his throne and said nothing. His tail lashed behind him, the only sign of his agitation. Danny stood in his usual place near the wall, watching the king's face. Finally, Razeth raised one claw. The room fell silent. I will go meet with them, he said. The council erupted again. Your Majesty, it is a trap. They will kill you. This is insanity. Enough. Razeth's roar shook the walls. I will go. I will bring a small diplomatic team. We will talk before we fight. This is my decision. General Kryn stood slowly. Then you go without your military command. I will not be part of this farce. So be it. Razeth's voice was ice. Danny will accompany me as my advisor. The journey to the neutral meeting station took 3 days. The ship was small, carrying only Razeth, Danny, and a handful of guards. The Dragon King spent most of the trip staring out the viewport at the stars, lost in thought. You are quiet, Your Majesty, Danny said on the second day. I am thinking about what you said. That fear and respect are different. Razeth did not look away from the stars. I built my empire on fear. It worked for 200 years. Now it is crumbling because I showed mercy once. Perhaps Kryn is right. Perhaps I have grown weak. Or perhaps your empire was always fragile. Danny suggested carefully. Things built on fear crack the moment the fear fades. Things built on respect last. You have never ruled anything human. You're 19 years old. Why should I believe your philosophy over 2 centuries of experience? Because your experience got you here, Danny said, sitting on a ship, hoping rebels will talk instead of fight. If the old ways still worked, we would not be having this conversation. Razeth finally turned to look at him. You are either very wise or very foolish. I have not decided which. Can I be both? The Dragon King's laugh was brief but genuine. Perhaps. They arrived at the meeting station to find it surrounded by Kelhari warships. The species was reptilian like the Draconeer, but smaller, with scales that shimmered green and gold. Their leader, Commander Lyssa, waited in the conference room with a dozen armed guards. She stood when Razeth entered. Her hand rested on her weapon. I expected threats and demands, not a diplomatic meeting. What game is this, Dragon King? No game, Razeth said. He sat, a gesture of peace in Draconeer culture. I came to talk, to understand why you rebel. Lyssa's eyes narrowed. You destroyed my homeworld cities during the conquest. You killed my parents. You enslaved my people. And you ask why we rebel. The room was tense enough to snap. Danny saw Razeth's claws dig into the armrests of his chair. The old Dragon King would have killed her for those words. But this Razeth just nodded slowly. You are right, he said. I did those things. I cannot undo them. I cannot bring back your parents or rebuild your cities as they were. But I can offer something else. What could you possibly offer that we would want? Change. Razeth leaned forward. The empire I built was wrong. I see that now. I ruled through fear and violence because I knew nothing else. But I am learning. Help me build something better. A federation where all species have a voice. Where tribute is fair and rule is just. Lyssa laughed bitterly. Pretty words from a tyrant. Why should we believe you? Danny spoke up. Because he traveled here unarmed to say them. Because he could have sent warships, but sent himself instead. Because he is trying, even though it is hard, and his own court calls him weak for it. The Kelhari commander looked at Danny for the first time. You are human. Earth was conquered. Why do you defend him? I do not defend what he did, Danny said. I defend what he is trying to become. People can change, Commander. Even Dragon Kings. The negotiations took 2 days. Lyssa demanded proof of Razeth's intentions. The Dragon King offered to reduce tribute across all Kelhari worlds by half. He proposed a constitutional council where representatives from all species could help govern. He suggested the Kelhari join this council and help write the new laws that IT was not perfect. Lyssa did not forgive him, but she agreed to a trial period. The rebellious colonies would rejoin the Federation under the new terms. If Razeth failed to follow through, the rebellion would resume. They shook hands, a human gesture Danny had taught them both. It felt awkward and strange, but it was a beginning on the return journey. Razeth stood at the viewport again. This time, Danny joined him. "I did not kill anyone today," the Dragon King said quietly. "In 200 years of rule, I have never resolved a conflict without violence. It feels wrong, like I lost." "You did not lose, Your Majesty. You chose a harder path. That takes more strength than destroying them would have. Kryn will say I surrendered, that I let them dictate terms. General Kryn is not here. You are." Danny smiled slightly. "Besides, you can always ask him to try negotiating next time. See how he does." Razeth's laugh echoed through the ship. It was a sound Danny had never heard before, genuine and free. For just a moment, the Dragon King did not sound like a tyrant or a warrior. He sounded like a person who had finally put down a weight he had carried too long. The Obsidian Fortress transformed over the following months. Representatives from dozens of worlds arrived for the Constitutional Convention, species that had never been allowed past the lower levels now walking the same halls as Draconeer nobility. Danny watched it all from his position as Royal Advisor on Interspecies Relations, a title that still felt strange to say out loud. The stable work continued, but Master Vrag had hired additional handlers. Danny spent most of his time now helping facilitate discussions between species that had spent centuries hating each other. It was exhausting work. Every meeting risked erupting into violence. Every compromise felt fragile. "The Kelhari want equal representation," Danny reported to Razeth one evening. They sat in what had become their usual meeting spot, a balcony overlooking the beast stables. But the Draconeer Council claims that giving conquered species the same voice as their conquerors is disrespectful. "The Draconeer Council needs to remember who is king," Razeth said. He sounded tired. "What do you think, Danny?" "Equal representation. I think if you want real change, Your Majesty, everyone needs to feel heard, even if it is uncomfortable for those who held all the power before." Razeth nodded slowly. "Make it happen. And stop calling me Your Majesty when we are alone. It is exhausting." Danny blinked. "What should I call you then?" "Razeth. Just Razeth." The Dragon King looked out over his fortress. "I have not had a friend in 300 years. Allies, yes. Subjects, thousands. But not a friend. I think you are the closest thing I have to one." The words hit Danny harder than he expected. He thought about the terrified boy who had stood before this same dragon months ago, certain he was about to die. Now they sat together watching the sunset like equals. "I would be honored to be your friend, Razeth." They sat in comfortable silence until the stars came out, but not everyone celebrated the changes. In the Draconeer military barracks, Warlord Therax gathered supporters in secret. He was older than Razeth, a veteran of the original conquests, and he believed the Empire was dying. "Our king has been corrupted by a human child," Therax told his followers. "He abandons our traditions. He gives power to those we defeated. He speaks of mercy and compromise like a weak politician instead of a warrior. This cannot continue." Word of the conspiracy reached Danny through whispered warnings from servants who still remembered his kindness in the stables. He brought the information to Razeth immediately. "Therax plans to challenge you," Danny said, his voice tight with worry. Under the old Draconeer laws, he could demand single combat for the throne. Razeth did not seem surprised. "I knew this was coming. Therax has always believed in the old ways. He sees what I am building as a betrayal. You could refuse the challenge. Change the law." "No." Razeth stood and walked to the window. "If I refuse, I prove his point, that I have abandoned Draconeer tradition. Half my people would join him. This must be settled the ancient way. But if you kill him, it proves you have not changed at all. And if I lose, everything we built dies with me." Razeth's laugh was bitter. "There is no winning here, Danny. Only different kinds of losing." The challenge was issued publicly 3 days later. Therax stood in the throne room and declared Razeth unfit to rule. He showed the court recordings of the king's emotional conversations with Danny, moments that were meant to be private. "This is your Dragon King," Therax announced, playing footage of Razeth speaking about his childhood trauma, about learning to trust again, crying to a human, sharing weakness like a child. Is this the leader you want? Or do you want strength returned to the throne? Many in the court shifted uncomfortably. Some nodded in agreement. The Draconeer valued emotional control above almost everything. Seeing their king vulnerable was shocking. Razeth accepted the challenge calmly. We fight in 7 days. In the ancient arena, winner takes the throne and the future of the empire. The week that followed was tense. Danny helped Razeth prepare, though he knew little about Draconeer combat. What he could offer was perspective. Therax wants you to fight like the old you, Danny said as they watched the Titan Wyrm practice maneuvers in the training yard. Brutal, overwhelming, merciless. If you fight that way, you prove him right. You have not really changed. What choice do I have? Is single combat. Only one of us walks away. You can choose how you fight. You can win without becoming what you used to be. Razeth was quiet for a long time. If I show mercy in the arena, he will use it against me. He will call it weakness. Maybe, Danny admitted. Or maybe you show the entire galaxy that strength and mercy can exist together. That you can be powerful without being cruel. The night before the challenge, Danny found Razeth in the stables. The Dragon King sat beside the Titan Wyrm's enclosure, both of them peaceful in the darkness. Danny sat down next to him without asking permission. I am afraid, Razeth said quietly. Not of dying. I have faced death many times. But of failing you. Of failing everyone who believes change is possible. You will not fail. You cannot know that. I know you tamed the Titan Wyrm, Danny said. You learned to negotiate instead of destroy. You became friends with a human stable boy even though your entire culture said it was beneath you. You have already done impossible things, Razeth. This is just one more. The Dragon King looked at him with those burning eyes. What if I lose control? What if the fight brings out the old me and I cannot stop it? Then I will remind you who you are now. I will be there, watching. And I will believe in you even if you stop believing in yourself. Razeth reached out with one massive claw and gently touched Danny's shoulder. It was the first time he had done so, a gesture of trust and affection. Thank you, my friend. The arena was ancient, carved into the bedrock beneath the obsidian fortress. Thousands gathered to watch, representatives from every world in the empire. The air was thick with anticipation and fear. This fight would determine the future of the galaxy. Danny sat in the section reserved for royal advisors, surrounded by beings who still viewed him with suspicion. Below, in the fighting pit, Razeth and Therax circled each other. Therax was larger, younger, and fought with the fury of absolute conviction. He believed he was saving the empire from corruption. Every strike carried the weight of tradition and honor. Razeth fought differently. He was defensive at first, studying his opponent, looking for openings. The crowd murmured. Some called it cowardice. Others recognized it as strategy. Fight like a dragon king, Therax roared. Or admit you have forgotten how. The insult struck deep. Danny saw Razeth's eyes flash with old rage. For a moment, he thought his friend would lose control, would revert to the brutal tyrant he used to be. But Razeth breathed deeply and centered himself. When he struck back, it was with precision instead of fury. He targeted Therax's wings, his legs, places that would disable but not kill. The battle lasted an hour. Therax fought to destroy. Razeth fought to end the conflict. Slowly, methodically, the younger warlord's advantages faded. His wings were damaged. His movement slowed. He could not understand why Razeth was winning. Finally, Therax collapsed. Razeth stood over him, claws raised for the killing blow that tradition demanded. The arena fell silent. This was the moment that mattered. Kill and prove nothing had changed. Spare and risk appearing weak. Danny leaned forward in his seat, barely breathing. Razeth lowered his claws. He extended his hand to Therax instead. I could kill you, Razeth said, his voice carrying across the arena. The old me would have. But I'm not that dragon anymore. I offer you a choice. Death, as tradition demands. Or life, serving the new empire we are building. Choose. Therax stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Confusion and anger warred on his face. Then, slowly, he reached up and took it. The arena erupted in noise. Some cheered, some booed, but everyone understood they had witnessed something unprecedented. The Dragon King had won through strength and mercy together. Razeth helped Therax to his feet and turned to address the crowd. This is what I am building. Not weakness, not surrender, but strength with purpose, power with wisdom, change with honor. Those who cannot accept this are free to leave. But you cannot stop what we have started. Danny found himself crying without shame, overwhelmed by pride and relief. His friend had done it, had proven that even the hardest hearts could transform. After the arena cleared, Razeth found Danny in the corridors. The Dragon King was exhausted but victorious. I did not kill him, Razeth said simply. I know. I saw. You were amazing. I was terrified the entire time. Danny laughed through his tears. Being brave does not mean not being afraid. It means being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. Razeth pulled him into an awkward embrace, careful not to crush him. Thank you for believing in me, Danny. I do not think I could have done this without you. You did it yourself. I just reminded you what was possible. They stood together in the quiet corridor while the fortress buzzed with conversation around them. The future was still uncertain. There would be more challenges, more resistance. But for now, they had won something precious. The right to keep trying. 5 years passed. The Obsidian Fortress no longer felt like a place of fear. Ships came and went freely, bringing diplomats and students and traders from hundreds of worlds. The Constitutional Council met weekly, debating laws and settling disputes without violence. It was messy and slow and imperfect, but it was working. Danny stood on the same balcony where he used to meet with Razeth, watching the sun set over the transformed fortress. He was 24 now, with responsibilities he never imagined as a scared stable boy. His hair had grown longer and his shoulders broader, but his eyes still held the same kindness that had saved a Ravager all those years ago. You are thinking too loud again, Razeth said, joining him. The Dragon King looked the same as ever, unchanged by years that marked humans so clearly. I can hear your mind working from across the fortress. Just remembering, Danny said. It has been 5 years since you dragged me before your throne and threatened to burn me. My best decision as king, Razeth replied with warmth in his voice, though I did not know it at the time. The reforms had spread across the empire. Tribute was reduced and made fair. Subject worlds gained representation. The Draconeer military focused on defense instead of conquest. Not everyone accepted the changes, but enough did to make them stick. Therax himself now served as military advisor, his loyalty earned through respect rather than fear. Danny had spent much of the past 5 years traveling. He visited worlds Razeth had once devastated, helping negotiate reparations and rebuild trust. He trained diplomats in what he called compassionate strength, teaching species to resolve conflicts without violence. His methods spread like seeds, taking root in places Danny never visited personally. The council wants you to address them tomorrow, Razeth said. They're voting on the final constitutional amendments. Your voice would matter. They do not need me anymore, Danny said. They have learned to work together. That was always the goal. Perhaps, but they would still value your perspective. Danny turned to look at his friend. Razeth seemed different lately, quieter. Something weighed on him. What is troubling you? The Dragon King was silent for a moment. Then he said, I've been thinking about my victims. The worlds I burned. The families I destroyed. The pain I caused in 2 centuries of conquest. How do I balance that, Danny? How do I make it right? You cannot, Danny said honestly. Some things cannot be fixed. You cannot bring back the dead or undo the trauma. But you can spend the rest of your life trying to be better. You can build something good from the ashes. That is all anyone can do. Is it enough? I do not know, but it is something, and something is better than nothing. Razeth nodded slowly. You have become wise, my friend. I learned from a dragon who learned from a stable boy. The circle completes itself. They watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Below them, in the transformed stables, creatures from a dozen worlds rested peacefully. Master Vrag had retired 2 years ago, replaced by a team of handlers who used Danny's gentle methods. The war beasts were now just beasts, treated with care and respect. The next day, Danny addressed the Constitutional Council. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the chamber that had once held only Draconeer nobility. He saw humans, Kelhuri, Krellians, and dozens of others sitting together as equals. "I am not good at speeches," Danny began. "I'm just someone who talked to animals and got lucky. But I have learned something in these 5 years. Change is not a destination. It is a direction. You will never be done changing, never be perfect, but you can keep choosing to be better." He looked at Razeth, who sat on a throne that no longer felt like an instrument of terror. King Razeth was the most feared being in the galaxy. He ruled through violence and terror for 200 years. Everyone said he could never change. But he did. Not all at once. Not perfectly, but genuinely. If a Dragon King can change, anyone can. If an empire built on conquest can transform into a federation built on cooperation, anything is possible. The question is not whether you are good enough yet. The question is whether you are willing to keep trying. The Council voted unanimously to adopt the final amendments. The Galactic Federation was officially reformed, with protections for all species and pathways for peaceful dispute resolution. It was not the end of conflict, but it was a framework for handling it without war. After the vote, Commander Lissa approached Danny. The Kelhuri leader had become an unexpected ally over the years, her hatred slowly transforming into grudging respect. "You changed the galaxy, human," she said. "A stable boy with no weapons and no army. Just kindness and stubborn hope. I did not think it was possible. I did not change anything," Danny replied. "I just reminded people what was already inside them, the capacity to choose something better." Months later, Danny received a message from Earth. His planet wanted him to come home and help establish formal diplomatic relations with the Federation. It was an honor and an opportunity. It was also goodbye that he found Razeth in the royal stables, sitting beside the Titan Wyrm. The creature was old now, moving slower but still majestic. It nuzzled against the Dragon King with obvious affection. "Earth wants me to come home," Danny said. Razeth did not look surprised. "I know. I received the formal request yesterday. Will you go?" "I think I should. They need someone who understands both sides. Someone who can bridge the gap." "They need you more than I do," Razeth agreed. "I will miss you, my friend. But I understand." They sat together in the familiar quiet of the stables. So much had changed since Danny first entered these pens as a terrified teenager. The creatures were calm now, well cared for and respected. The fortress above was filled with hope instead of fear. The galaxy was healing, slowly but genuinely. "Do you remember what you asked me?" Danny said. "That first day after I tamed the Titan Wyrm. You asked me how I turned monsters into allies. I remember. I never gave you a complete answer. Want to hear it now?" Razeth nodded. "They were never monsters," Danny said. "They were just scared and hurting and trying to survive. When you treat someone like a monster, they become one. When you treat them with kindness, you give them the chance to be something else. That is true for war beasts and dragon kings alike." Razeth's eyes glistened with something that might have been tears. "You saw me when I was most monstrous and chose to believe I could be better. Why? Because someone has to be the first to believe. Someone has to take the risk. Otherwise, nothing ever changes." Danny smiled. "Besides, I was a stable boy. Believing in difficult creatures was my job." They embraced, dragon and human, king and friend. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying openly and neither was ashamed. Danny left the following week. The departure ceremony was small, just close friends and advisors. Razeth gave him a gift, a scale from the Titan Wyrm, preserved and mounted. "So you never forget where you started," the Dragon King said. "I could never forget this place," Danny replied. "Were you?" The ship lifted off, carrying Danny toward Earth and new responsibilities. He watched the obsidian fortress shrink in the viewport until it was just another star in the vast darkness. But he knew Razeth would continue the work they started. The Dragon King had learned his lessons well. Years later, Danny stood before the United Earth Assembly and told them the story. How a conquered human had befriended a tyrant dragon. How kindness had transformed an empire. how the smallest voice could speak the greatest truth. King Razeth showed mercy to no one, Danny concluded, until a stable boy showed him mercy was not weakness. Now he leads a federation where hundreds of species live in peace. Not perfect peace, but working peace, growing peace. I tell you this story because Earth is joining that federation. We will have challenges. There will be species who still hate us for resisting conquest. There will be conflicts and misunderstandings. But we have something powerful on our side. We are human. We connect. We empathize. We see the person beyond the monster. That is our strength in the galaxy. That is what we bring to the stars. Not weapons or technology, but the simple revolutionary act of treating others with compassion. The Assembly approved Earth's full membership in the Galactic Federation. Danny became Earth's chief ambassador, a role he held for 30 years. He traveled the galaxy teaching his methods, helping species resolve ancient conflicts, building bridges between worlds that had been enemies for centuries, that he visited the Obsidian Fortress often. Each time, he and Razeth would sit in the old stables and talk like they used to. The Dragon King was changing too, growing gentler with age, his reputation transforming from terror to wisdom. On Danny's 50th birthday, Razeth gave him another gift. The entire stable complex had been converted into a memorial and academy. Students from every species came to learn about peaceful conflict resolution. At the entrance stood a statue, a young human boy reaching out to touch a dragon's claw. "This is where it started," Razeth said, "where a scared boy chose kindness over fear, where a monster learned to be a king. I wanted to preserve it, so future generations remember that change is always possible." Danny stood before the statue, seeing his younger self frozen in bronze. So much fear in that boy's eyes. So much desperate hope. "Do you think we succeeded?" Danny asked. "Really succeeded? Look around you." Razeth gestured to the students walking the halls, dozens of species learning together. "The galaxy is not perfect. We still have conflicts and problems. But we resolve them differently now. We talk before we fight. We try mercy before destruction. We remember that our enemies are people too." "You did that, Danny. You showed one dragon a different way to be strong. That dragon showed his empire. The empire showed the galaxy. Ripples from a single stone thrown into still water." They walked together through the memorial, reading the exhibits that documented their journey. The original stable records, holovids of the Constitutional Convention, testimonials from species who had been enemies and learned to be friends. That the center of the memorial was the Titan Wyrm itself. The creature had died of old age 10 years ago, and Razeth had it preserved as a symbol of what was possible. It stood in a peaceful pose, head lowered, eyes gentle. Nothing like the violent beast it had been when captured. Danny reached out and touched its scales, remembering. "Do you know what the best part is?" he said. "The part one I'm most proud of?" "What?" "You do not need me anymore. Any of you. The changes we made are self-sustaining now. The galaxy learned the lesson. I can just be an old human telling stories about the time I befriended a dragon king." Razeth laughed, the sound warm and free. "You will never be just anything, my friend. You are the stable boy who changed the universe. That story will outlive us both." They stood together in the memorial that had once been a place of fear and violence. Outside, ships from 1,000 worlds arrived and departed in peace. Children of species that used to be enemies played together in the fortress gardens. The future was still uncertain, still imperfect, but it was bright with possibility. Danny thought about the scared boy he had been, facing a tyrant dragon and choosing kindness when fear would have been easier. He thought about every choice since then, every moment of doubt, every small act of compassion that somehow became something larger. "Thank you," he said to Razeth, "for letting me in, for trusting me, for choosing to change even when it was hard." "Thank you for believing I could," Razeth replied. "Now come, let's visit the old pens one more time. I want to show you the new handlers. They use your methods perfectly. You should be proud." They walked through the memorial together, dragon and human, king and stable boy, Two friends who proved that even the hardest hearts can soften and the smallest voices can echo across the stars at the end.